Julie said that you
I never read the pilot.
Okay, that you read a script or something. You were at her house and you said, "This is going to be my role." And David Nutter was actually very influential in casting you. What was that process like?
That's what Julie told you?
Huh?
That was Julie's story?
Mm-hmm. Right, guys?
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds so much easier than what it felt like. That would be amazing. I read the script. I got sent the whole sort of batch of everything from my agents, and it was like, the 30 pilot scripts for the year that they thought that I might like, and I read them all, and there were a few that stuck out that I was a big fan of, and obviously this was like my top favorite. And I watched the Belgian series that the show is based on, and just sort of got to see what they did with their 10 episodes. I think it was 10. And I was just hooked. I said, there's no way I can't get this part. So then, I talked with Julie a bit about it, and she was like, I think you might be a little young for what it is, and that was sort of how it stood, and I just sort of went in LA in front of her and David, and sort of took off from there. He sort of saw something he liked, and I guess that's sort of all you need, is to have people start to root for you. And then I think the whole process, I went to Warner Brothers, and I went to CW, and ran the gauntlet. But it was good.
So you're actually the first actor we've talked to today that did watch the Belgian series. Everyone else said they made a choice not to. So what was your decision to do that, or did it inform your performance at all? Or?
Well, I watched it before I had even auditioned for it.
Okay.
So it was a part of my decision-making process in terms of like what projects I was passionate about. And so seeing the show, just seeing the way that they did it, and obviously our show is different, but seeing the world that they created and what we were trying to base our show on, it got me so excited. And I knew that they wanted to do sort of the same first season. Obviously we've diverted in a lot of ways, as you'll see when it airs, but it has the same setup and the same sort of storyline as theirs, and so seeing it really got me pretty pumped about the prospect of playing this guy and bringing him to life. And we're all so different. We might have similar sensibilities, or we might sort of tick the same way, or have like a similar energy to the other actors, but look-wise alone, I mean, he's the guy who plays Jake in their show is like late 30s, or even 40 or so, and he's sort of like long curly hair. We're just very different. We're all like that. Obviously David's black, their guy's like this white guy who's 40. It's all just very different. I think my decision was not really, hey, okay, I have this part, do I want to watch what this other guy did or not? It was just more for the show, for tone. But that being said, I may have gone back and watched anyway. I don't know. It wasn't a thought, because once I was actually playing the part, I was never looking at the Belgian series as a point of reference or anything. So yeah, I think that's my long-winded answer.
You just played one of arguably the greatest villains on the Vampire Diaries, so what are you going to do to set this role apart, or kind of make it stand out from that?
I'm going to change my hair and grow a beard. Sort of go from there. This guy is so incredibly different from Kai. They're on the spectrum in terms of, good and evil, point blank. Like, that's the most obvious difference. And in terms of introvert versus extrovert, they're just polarizingly different, which is kind of nice. And it was fun, because when we shot the pilot, I was shooting that as we were shooting the last 2 episodes of Vampire Diaries. So I'm, showing up at weddings and stabbing siblings in the pregnant stomachs while I'm saving the world as a cop. And this other show is kind of this very sharp contrast, which was fun. That's one of the best parts of the job, is getting to pretend to be people who are so unlike yourself and also unlike the other characters you played. So, I think people will see the differences pretty quickly. They're sort of completely separate humans, which is good. It's fun.
Can you talk about how angry Jake seems to get in the pilot when he's put into this situation? Yeah, he, when he gets trapped, his first impulse is, I'm number one, I gotta protect me. And that's we sort of see pieces of him in the first few episodes the season starts off. We see that he's got anger problems. And we don't necessarily know where that comes from, but we know that his sort of means of dealing with things is sometimes aggressive.
and we start to unravel that story a bit, and we don't ever go back and do a full backstory. Like, we don't know, okay, this is the childhood trauma that caused this in his life. It's not like that. It's just we see the result of this guy's, years on the planet. And that's sort of his obstacle. He gets in his own way. And his story is one of being he doesn't desire the sort of role that's handed to him. He doesn't want to be a hero. He doesn't want to step up and be the one in charge. But he's sort of one of the few law enforcements inside, and he doesn't have much of a choice, with his buddy Lex on the other side sort of running the show and saying, no man, you gotta step up and do this. It sort of puts him in a position where he's gotta fight those inner demons and work through his rage and try to be the good guy. Yeah. What else?
What do you think is most helpful to him in the process of trying to step into that role of the hero? Like, what pushes him that direction?
Yeah, that's sort of the best way to answer that question is sort of focus on what the show really is about, and it's really about humans who are very, very ordinary, having to deal with these extraordinary circumstances and become something different than what they were before. It's a story of hope, and it's a story of people being put with their backs against the wall with really nowhere to go. And you either sink down and are defeated, or you push forward and you sort of rise above the challenge. And you see these people that we watch, the main characters in the show, are all put in horribly uncomfortable positions. And you see them at war with themselves, and sometimes they lose, and sometimes they take a couple steps back, and sometimes they persevere and they sort of advance and come out of it changed. And that's sort of the theme of the show, is that, which sort of matches the answer to that.
What kind of challenges will he have being one of, or the only kind of cop within the district that's quarantined?
What kind of challenges is he going to face?
Yeah.
Every challenge. I mean, he gets sort of in the first few episodes you start to see, he really has gotten excuse my French, the shit end of the stick, and every job that you wouldn't want, he's given. And he sort of is angry about that at first, and he sort of shirks the responsibility and doesn't want to do it. And his whole story is that of seeing if he's able to man up and come to the place where he does the right thing instead of the selfish thing. But yeah, he sort of, he's the guy. He's trying to wrangle anybody and everybody who has the power inside to enforce any sort of control and keep it from becoming the utter pandemonium that we see in the pilot. We know that it becomes. We just don't know when.
Was it interesting for you to do a show now based in reality and as real as possible?
Yeah.
As opposed to vampires and.
Oh, that's not real? No, that's the best part, I think, is that this show is so. The best and worst part. The show is so real and so. It really shakes us all. And we'll have table reads where it's just very emotional. All of it's just even reading the words of what's going to happen in the show. It's a very true story. It's very much about human response and sometimes compassion and sometimes heartache and sometimes selfishness, and it's all things that are very stripped down and raw. And so going from sort of a fantasy world where everything's elevated and doing magic and people don't die, this is the opposite of that. And when you die, you're dead, and you die quickly, and everyone else dies as well around you. So it's sort of, it's nice to have the sort of change into that world. But it's sort of, it changes us too as we're working on it, we found, because it really is about these real people, and you end up kind of carrying around pieces of that more than you would with a fantasy show. So the aftermath of that is different, but it's great. It's a lovely experience for all of us. So.
Do you have a reaction now when someone coughs around you somewhere?
Yeah, there's definitely a level of germophobia that we've all sort of developed over the course of working on the show, and it's it's kind of fun to watch at conventions or things like that with the Purells out there, and we might have a bit more of an instinct to go over and do that than the other shows. But yeah, no, it's, you know, people cough on set all the time, or like it's a funny thing during a take if someone sneezes. In other shows, you just keep going, or if you sort of have a tickle in your throat. But if you, like I just did, if you sniff during a take, you sort of have to go back and do it again, because if there's anything that shows that you're sick, there's a problem. Because then the audience is going to go, oh my God, he's sick. And that's not, you know, the point of the scene.
Yeah.
It's an accident, it's incidental that I'm, you know, both crying and sniffing at the same time. I'm not sick. You know, it's sort of it's like, that's sort of the fun part of working on a disease show, is you can't be sick.
Can you talk about the relationship with Jana, and then also then how Lex kind of plays into that as well?
Yeah, Jake and Jana were sort of a thing first, and that sort of is how Lex met Jana, was through Jake, and they're all great now, and there's no sort of visible animosity about the situation, but you know, when friends date friends, sometimes there's something that you never addressed with it that sort of lives underneath it, and even though everyone's totally cool with it, and Jana and Jake are really close, and obviously Lex and Jake are best friends, and you know, they're in love, that little thing. There's an openness and understanding if that's the situation, but I think it's the kind of thing that informs their friendships in ways, and sometimes maybe things that they didn't deal with when that happened, when Jake and Jana didn't work out, and Lex was like, hey, I'm gonna date her, is that cool? You know, the things they didn't really talk about or settle might sort of create some tension.
Especially with the two of them in
Sure, yeah.
quarantine.
Yeah, they're in, I mean, Jake and Jana are both inside and Lex is outside. And, yeah, and that's a fun sort of story to watch evolve, is those friendships and how they're separated, and how Jake and Jana are the ones inside, and they obviously have this past, but now they're totally just friends. And yeah, it does inform the relationships, but that's not like, you know, it's not a love triangle story. It's not a Stelena situation.
Thankfully, right?
How physically demanding is the role? David was talking about you guys training together,
Yeah.
and like, do you keep doing it as you shoot, or was that just like leading up to when you guys started?
Yeah, that was a lot more doable back when we shot the pilot, because we have more days to shoot for the pilot. But for episodes now, our schedules are so busy. It's kind of hard to coordinate, especially with our stories being separate. Anytime I'm not working, he's working, because he's inside. He's outside, I'm inside. Did I say that right? Yeah. There it is. Lex is outside. Yeah, so that makes it hard, you know, for our schedules to overlap in the right ways. But yeah, we trained a lot together, and obviously, like, training is a part of each of our roles being police officers, and my character ends up doing some physical stuff inside in terms of his responsibilities. So it's not like he's pumping iron when he's inside, but he's still very active, as we'll come to find out. He's given a lot of jobs. So that had to become a part of my work, was finding, you know, shoot 14 hours and then go to the gym at night and still sort of make it happen, which isn't always your favorite thing, but it's a part of it. And that was one thing too that was important for both of us, was to build that sort of bond. And the easiest way for us to do that was to just spend time together, and training was the most convenient way to do that. Yeah, you know, it's like you bro out a bit, just hanging, spotting each other. Come on, man, 2 more. It's great. It was an awesome way to get to know each other. So.
We heard you guys actually worked with a police officer that
Yeah.
showed you sort of how, can you talk a little bit about that, and sort of maybe the training you went through for
Yeah.
that as well?
Yeah, we worked with an LAPD officer first, and we have a few contacts that we still talk to, and now there's an Atlanta police officer, a sergeant who we sort of correspond with whenever we have questions or need to go over sort of maneuvers and things like that. And the show, it's not Chicago PD. We're not doing routine pullovers. I mean, there's a virus outbreak. We're not worried about drunk driving at the moment. It's more like stay alive. So the sort of protocol for what we're doing is different, but the police brain is what informs every decision, and that's something that police officers don't shake even once they're retired or have left the field. And so that was an important thing for us to do was to meet with them. I read a couple books, a couple biographies about police officers. One was about an NYPD officer, just his daily responsibilities, how it was, how it affected him. I read one that was really appropriate that was called, what was it? It was Law Enforcement, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement and Their Families was the name of the book. And it was literally like a breakdown of the repercussions and the effects of being in this hypervigilant state during the day and where you go home and how there's a pendulum swing. And it's more of an advice book for law enforcement officers to sort of deal with that, but for me as an actor it was like such a gift to sort of get into the psyche. And I gave it to David, he read it too. But it's, we sort of did some of that stuff to try to find the headspace these people live in, and working with them on actual tactical things, like he and I worked together as partners and, you know, entering spaces and sort of clearing rooms and dealing with a perp who might have a knife. We did sort of different situational stuff. And then being here, we had, you know, sometimes we'll have techs on set to sort of help us guide us through the process of doing things that are believable. And we'll call over and say, like, does that look funny? And they're like, no, you're good. And what they mean is, it's awful. But no, it's good. It's good to have that in your brain, because you don't want to hold the gun the wrong way. You don't want to do something that takes people out of the reality when the show is supposed to be almost feeling like you're right there. If a cop sees it and, you know, calls BS on it, that takes them out. So we're trying to keep it as real as possible. But yeah, it was fun, and it was, you know, it was sort of intimidating. It's trying to absorb what they do, and, you know, 9 months of training plus years of experience is a very daunting task. So we just try to fake it as we can.
Can you talk a little bit about filming in Atlanta? I know you've been here for a while,
Yeah.
From before this filming. Can you talk a little bit about the film community here in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing how big it's gotten out here. It's like every script I read now, for even the off season, it shoots in Atlanta. It's kind of a massive community. But I love shooting here. It's got seasons, which is familiar to me because I'm not from the West Coast. So now living in LA, I miss the cold of it sometimes. And yeah, it's a really cool city to shoot in too, because we're actually able to go into the metropolis and shoot Atlanta for Atlanta. Whereas a lot of times you're shooting in Vancouver and pretending it's a West Coast city, and it's nice to sort of shoot the city for what it is. And when it's a park, it's the actual park. And the street names, they announce where the cordon is, and you drive there and you go, oh, my house I'm in the cordon. It's good to know. Or like, oh, my gym is outside. That's nice. You know, it's like you look at the map and it's real, which is kind of fun. But yeah, I love shooting there. It's a good city, good food.
Now, Julie referred to the epidemic as kind of the monster of this series. Now, as Jake, as a representative basically of the government, a policeman who's stuck in cordon in this chaotic environment, does he find himself coming up against a lot of people trying to get back that control within this environment?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing that happens when the disease breaks out, you sort of see it in every, whether it's World War Z or Walking Dead or any outbreak story, it's about zombies or about a virus. You see people sort of go into this high octane, sort of adrenaline fueled, usually poor decision making state of being that sort of revolves around survival. And it's their state of survival is all the instincts are allowed to take control. So they're not really thinking as much as they are just acting on what feels like the proper choice in order to not die. And inside the cordon, that is exactly what happens. Every single person, once they realize the seriousness of it, and once they realize, oh, I actually can't get out, they're not going to let anybody out. Sort of a party gun, I think. Once they realize they're not going to get out, some of the worst qualities come out of these people. And sort of everyone's moral code goes straight out the window. And wow. Everyone's moral code goes straight out the window, and it becomes about how do I stay alive and how do I keep this thing away from me and my family. And sometimes that involves doing things that people wouldn't do. Sometimes it involves using force or threatening or even killing and violence. And that's a very unique beast to be happening inside this very confined space filled with people who are ill. So Jake sort of is the one on the streets, the one pounding the pavement, sort of facing it in the worst possible way every single day. So there's a lot of confrontation moments that happens where he sort of encounters someone who's sick or someone who's sort of embracing the worst qualities in themselves in the response to the situation. But yeah, he sort of is the one character on the show who's thrown into it the worst, probably. Yeah.
In the pilot, there's the phrase 4 to 6 feet.
Yeah.
Is that something that kind of continues?
You will
throughout the
never
series?
hear it again. Yeah, it's in every episode. It's gonna be on shirts. Like it's everywhere. It's sort of. I have a tattoo now. It's really like the rule is 4 to 6 feet, and they sort of just try to spread it around to keep people safe. And yeah, it's definitely like a mantra that runs throughout the whole series.
Has your cast started a 4 to 6 feet drinking game or anything like that?
Or what? If you get within 4 to 6 feet?
No, like whenever you have to say it, somebody's.
See, that'll be a good game. Every time you see someone who's sick on the show, people would die from drinking. That's not a good drinking game because you will not remember the episode. I think it's more like there was actually this really fun thing for those actors with accents on the show, which only George gets to speak in his his British, his native tongue. And so they had this line they were going to call, there's this area in Atlanta called the fourth ward. See,
Yes.
I'm already tripping on it. And the writers on the page when they wrote it, I guess maybe they hadn't said it out loud enough times in the room to hear that it was very complicated, but they developed this sort of gang that's called the Fourth Ward Lords. And to give it to an Australian or a British actor who doesn't say ours and they're trying to do an American accent, they all were like Fourth Ward Lords. So they had to change it. So they changed the name of the gang to something similar because it was just too many sounds.
You're coming up on the finale for the season, so looking back on all of the episodes that you've shot, what surprised you the most about your character's journey?
Oh gosh. I had a meeting with Julie for the pilot, but then again we sort of talked about it multiple times after we got the pickup, just about the arc and about because I'm a big timeline person. That's most of my work is spent looking at each scene and the order of the beats and what happens, and then looking at each scene in the episode and how that journey differs and where the high point is and where the resolution is and where it's leading, and then looking at the whole season. That's sort of the bulk of my work. And so that what's hard in television is, unlike a film, you don't get that. You don't have the whole. You just got the last 2 episodes within the past few weeks, so that's you don't have the awareness of what your whole arc is going to be. So talking to her about it, she gave me as many specifics as they had. But things always change. By episode 6, episode 13 is different because logistically and also a new inspiration comes up, or an actor plays a scene one way and they realize, we need to put something like that here, and so everything changes. But the main arc of my character was sort of intact, and I knew the big points. I knew the main story that was going to happen, and so getting to work on that arc was great. It was everything that I thought it was going to be. But there's always surprises, and there's always episodes that take more out of you than you expect them to. And there's some episodes like episode 7. I won't say anything about it, but just as a number, it's sort of a different energy than some of our other episodes, and it's getting to do something like that was sort of surprising because I didn't expect to have that in the season, and it's a little bit of a different pace, it's a different feel, and it's exciting to get to sort of stop time for a second and look at this episode that we shot that's so sort of a different energy for my character, and it's nice. I'm being so vague. I'm sorry. But it's there are a lot of moments looking back that are that were surprises, that were some of my favorite parts to shoot. It's such a hard question to answer without telling you. I'm trying to give you a nice answer without saying, well, yeah, and then I blow up. I don't have a prime example for you.
We can do one last question, guys.
When you were playing Kai, you got a lot of fast fan feedback because the episodes aired a couple weeks after, and now you're filming an entire season before anybody sees anything. Is that a different feeling for you?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the show is received too. It's such a different demographic, I think, the audience. I think fans of the Vampire Diaries will still, I think they'll love the show because it's good. You know, it is a different feel. It's not sci-fi. It's not sort of that peppy, quippy energy. It's like a real sort of dirty, gritty, dramatic, dark adult show. And so I think it'll be interesting to see who watches it and how they respond, especially on things like social media, because we won't have the same kind of feedback because it's not the same audience. But yeah, that'll be different. And you know, having shot the whole entire thing before we even know when we're airing is very different, as opposed to episodes coming out as you're shooting something. But there's something nice about that. They have more time in post to polish things, and we have more time for reshoots. Like we could go reshoot stuff from the pilot if we wanted to, because we haven't aired yet. You know, that's kind of a nice thing that you don't get when you're airing as it's coming out. And also, not having the 22 episode format, the story is a little more concise in that it's easier to allow it to have a building momentum to the finale. Whereas in 22, that's a lot of hours of television. It's hard to not sort of divert and have like side episodes and ones where fans watch and are like, oh, that wasn't my favorite one, you know. And we're gonna have that. That's every show. But it's nicer to bring it closer together, especially with our show, which is such a limited timeline. You know, time doesn't fly by. We're not like 2 years in the future. We're not even like a month. So that's kind of different. But yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how people respond to it, and hopefully we get some engagement from